The morning rain drummed against the windows of Sunrise Cafe as Victoria Hayes wiped down tables for the third time that hour. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her apron bore the faint stains of a busy breakfast rush. At 28, she had learned to find beauty in small moments, like the way steam rose from fresh coffee cups, or how her 8-year-old daughter Emma's drawings decorated the staff room wall. Another delivery order just came in, called Janet, the cafe manager, waving a receipt. Penthouse suite on Pine Street, the fancy new building. Victoria glanced at the clock. Her daughter would be home from school in 3 hours, and she needed every dollar from these delivery tips. "I'll take it," she said, untying her apron and grabbing the insulated bag. The rain had stopped by the time she reached the gleaming glass tower that seemed to pierce the Seattle sky. The doorman, dressed in a crisp uniform, looked her up and down before directing her to the private elevator. Victoria had delivered 2 expensive places before, but never somewhere quite this grand. The elevator climbed silently to the 40th floor. She checked her reflection in the polished doors, smoothing down a few loose strands of hair. The doors opened to reveal a hallway with only one door. She knocked twice, balancing the coffee tray carefully. Footsteps approached from inside and the door swung open. Time stopped. The man standing before her had the same deep blue eyes she remembered from her teenage dreams, the same strong jawline that had once made her heart race. But now he was taller, broader, wearing an expensive suit that spoke of success and power. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His presence filled the doorway like he owned not just this apartment, but the entire world. "Victoria," Jonathan Blake whispered, his voice deeper than she remembered, but unmistakably his. The coffee tray trembled in her hands. She had imagined this moment countless times over the past 12 years, but never like this. Never with her wearing a faded uniform and him looking like he belonged on magazine covers. The boy who had once picked wildflowers for her behind the old mill in Millbrook was now clearly a man who could buy entire fields of them. "Your coffee," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't move to take it. Instead, his eyes searched her face as if memorizing every detail. "I can't believe it's really you." Victoria's chest tightened. The hallway felt too small, the air too thin. "I should go. I have other deliveries." "Wait." He stepped aside, gesturing into his apartment. "Please, just for a moment." Against her better judgment, she entered. The penthouse was everything she had expected and more. Floor 2 ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city and Puget Sound. Modern furniture, in neutral tones, created an atmosphere of sophisticated comfort. But somehow the space felt cold, empty, despite its grandeur. "You live here," she said, setting the tray on a marble countertop. "I moved back to Seattle 6 months ago." He watched her carefully, as if afraid she might disappear. "I never thought I'd see you again." Victoria wrapped her arms around herself, protective gesture she had perfected over the years. "Well, here I am, delivering your coffee." The silence stretched between them, filled with memories of summer nights by the lake, stolen kisses behind the library, and promises they had been too young to keep. Jonathan had been 17 when his family moved away from Millbrook, leaving Victoria heartbroken at 15. No goodbye, no explanation, just an empty house where the Blake family had once lived. "You look beautiful," he said softly. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I look tired, Jonathan, because I am tired." "You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, don't?" She held up a hand. "Please don't say things like that." "Why not?" "It's true, because you left." The words came out sharper than she intended. "You left without a word, and I spent months wondering what I had done wrong." Jonathan's face crumpled. "Victoria, it wasn't like that. My parents, they forced us to leave. My father got transferred suddenly, and we had to pack everything in 3 days. I tried to call you, but the phone lines were already disconnected. You could have written. I did write. Letters, emails, everything. Did you ever get them?" Victoria stared at him. "No, I never got anything." "My mother," he said quietly, running a hand through his hair. "She must have intercepted them. She never approved of us. Said you were a distraction from my studies." The revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow. All these years she had believed he had simply forgotten about her, moved on to bigger and better things. But if he had tried to contact her, if he had written letters she'd never received, "It doesn't matter now," she said, though her voice wavered. "That was a long time ago. It matters to me." He stepped closer, and she caught the faint scent of his cologne, expensive and sophisticated. Nothing like the boy who used to smell of grass stains and summer air. "Tell me about your life, Victoria. Are you married? Happy?" She thought of Emma, waiting at their neighbor's house after school. Emma, who asked sometimes why other kids had daddies and she didn't. "I have a daughter," she said simply. Something flickered across Jonathan's face. "A daughter. Her name is Emma. She's 8. And her father." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Not in the picture." Jonathan nodded slowly. "I'm sorry. That must be difficult. We manage." She moved toward the door. "I really should go, Victoria. Wait." He followed her. "I'd like to see you again. To talk properly? I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" She turned to face him, and for a moment, he saw past the carefully constructed walls to the hurt 15-year-old girl who had waited by her window. Every night for months, hoping to see his face. "Because you're you," she said, gesturing at the opulent apartment around them. "And I'm me. I work 3 jobs to pay rent on a 1-bedroom apartment. I shop at thrift stores and clip coupons. This," she waved her hand between them. "This isn't real life, Jonathan. This is just a coincidence. What if I don't want it to be just a coincidence?" Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that seeing you again feels like coming home after being lost for 12 years. The sincerity in his voice nearly broke her resolve. But she had Emma to think about now. Little girl who deserved stability and consistency. Not the emotional chaos that Jonathan Blake had once brought into Victoria's life. "I have to go," she repeated, her hand on the door handle. "At least tell me where you live. How I can find you." Victoria hesitated. Every logical part of her brain screamed warnings. But her heart remembered the way he used to make her laugh, the way he had been her first everything. "Sunrise Café on 3rd Avenue, she said finally. "I worked there most mornings." A smile spread across his face. The same crooked grin that had made her fall in love with him as a teenager. "Thank you." She nodded and slipped out the door, her legs shaky as she waited for the elevator. When the doors closed, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing heart. Jonathan Blake was back in her life. It's looking like every dream she had ever had, and representing everything she could never have. She thought of Emma's latest drawing, a crayon sketch of 2 stick figures under a rainbow, labeled "Me and Mommy." It was enough. It had to be enough. But as the elevator descended toward the street level, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully ordered world was about to change forever. Back in his penthouse, Jonathan stood at the window, watching the small figure of Victoria disappear into the busy street below. His hands pressed against the cool glass as memories flooded back, Victoria laughing as they skipped stones across Miller's Pond. Victoria crying in his arms when her grandmother passed away. Victoria's eyes wide with wonder and love, the first time he told her he loved her too. He had spent 12 years building an empire, acquiring companies, making deals worth millions of dollars. But none of it had filled the Victoria-shaped hole in his heart. And now she was here, within reach, but further away than ever. He pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant. "Clear my schedule for tomorrow morning," he said. "I have somewhere important to be." As the Seattle skyline sparkled in the evening light, 2 hearts that had once beat as one began to remember what it felt like to hope again. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical Seattle weather that matched Victoria's unsettled mood. She had barely slept, her mind replaying every moment of seeing Jonathan again. As she prepared Emma's breakfast, her daughter chattered about a school project on famous inventors. "Mrs. Peterson says we need to pick someone who changed the world," Emma said, spreading peanut butter on her toast with careful precision. "I want to do someone nobody else will pick." Victoria smiled, watching her daughter's serious expression. Emma had inherited her curiosity and determination, traits that would serve her well in life. What about Katherine Johnson? She was a mathematician who helped send astronauts to space. That's perfect, Mom. Emma's face lit up. Will you help me research her at the library tonight? Of course, sweetheart. Victoria kissed the top of Emma's head, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. After dropping Emma at school, Victoria headed to Sunrise Cafe, her thoughts still tangled. She had almost convinced herself that yesterday had been a dream when she saw him through the front window. Sitting at a corner table with a newspaper and untouched coffee, Jonathan wore jeans and a simple blue sweater today. Looking more like the boy she remembered, but still carrying himself with the confidence of a man accustomed to success. Several other customers had noticed him too, whispering and stealing glances. Victoria's hands trembled as she tied her apron. Janet raised an eyebrow from behind the counter. "Friend of yours?" Janet asked, nodding toward Jonathan. "Something like that," Victoria replied, grabbing a coffee pot and approaching his table. "Good morning," she said quietly. Jonathan looked up, and his entire face transformed with relief. "You came to work. I wasn't sure you would. I need this job," Victoria replied simply, refilling his untouched cup. "Can you sit with me?" "Just for a few minutes." Victoria glanced around the cafe. The morning rush had ended, and only a few regulars remained, absorbed in their laptops and newspapers. She slid into the seat across from him, keeping her hands folded in her lap. "I did some research last night," Jonathan said. "About Millbrook, about what happened to people we knew." "Jonathan, please don't dig into my past." "I'm not digging, Victoria. I'm trying to understand." "I found out about Emma's father." Victoria's jaw tightened. "What did you find out?" "His name was Ryan Mitchell. He left town when Emma was 6 months old. He hasn't paid child support or made contact since." "How do you know all that?" Jonathan reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. "I had my investigators look into it. I'm sorry, I know it's invasive. But I needed to understand what your life has been like." Victoria stared at the folder, anger building in her chest. "You had me investigated?" "I had to know if you needed help." "I don't need your help," Victoria said, standing up. "And I certainly don't need you running background checks on my life like I'm some kind of business acquisition." "Victoria, wait." Jonathan caught her wrist gently. "Please sit down. Let me explain." The touch of his skin against hers sent electricity up her arm. The same sensation she remembered from years ago. Reluctantly, she sat back down. "I'm not trying to control you," he said softly. "But I care about you. I never stopped caring about you. And now I find out you've been struggling alone, working multiple jobs, barely making ends meet while raising a daughter. Do you have any idea what that does to me? My struggles are not your responsibility. Maybe not legally, but morally. Victoria, if I had known, if I had been able to find you sooner, do you think I would have let you go through all that alone?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You can't just come back into my life and try to fix everything with money. I'm not trying to fix you with money. You don't need fixing. You're the strongest person I've ever known." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "But I can make things easier. I can give Emma opportunities, give you breathing room to pursue your dreams again." "What dreams?" "I gave those up a long time ago, did you? Or did you just put them on hold?" Jonathan opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. It was Victoria's old sketchbook, the one she used to fill with designs for houses and gardens. "I kept this. All these years, I kept it." Victoria's breath caught. She reached for the photo with shaking hands. "I thought I lost this when we moved out of the cottage. I found it the day before we left Millbrook. You had left it at the library. I was going to give it back to you. But then everything happened so fast." Victoria studied the image of her younger self's drawings. She had dreamed of becoming an architect then, of designing beautiful homes where families could grow and flourish. The dreams felt impossibly distant now. "You still could," Jonathan said, reading her expression. "You could go back to school, get your degree. I could help with Emma, with expenses." "Why?" Victoria looked up at him. "Why does this matter to you so much?" Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. "Because losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. Because I've spent 12 years trying to fill a hole that only you could fill. Because I think about you every day. Wonder if you're happy, if you're safe, if you ever think of me." "Jonathan," I know this is overwhelming. I know I have no right to walk back into your life and make these offers. But Victoria, I'm not the same 17-year-old boy who let his parents dictate his choices. I make my own decisions now. Victoria stood up again, needing space to think. I need time, of course. Take all the time you need. She started to walk away, then turned back. Emma doesn't know anything about you. Not us. If we do this, whatever this is, she comes first. Always. I wouldn't expect anything else that afternoon. Victoria picked Emma up from school as usual, but her daughter immediately sensed something different. You seem weird today, Mom, Emma said as they walked home. Good weird, though. Like you're thinking about something happy. Victoria squeezed her daughter's hand. Just thinking about grown-up stuff, baby. Is it about the man from the café? Mrs. Patterson saw him there when she got her morning coffee. She said he was very handsome and kept looking at you. Victoria's cheeks burned. Mrs. Patterson needs to mind her own business. Emma giggled. She said he looked at you like Prince Eric looks at Ariel in the movie. Emma Rose Hayes. You are too smart for your own good. They spent the evening at the library researching Katherine Johnson, but Victoria found herself distracted. Emma worked diligently, taking notes in her careful handwriting, completely absorbed in learning about the brilliant mathematician who had calculated rocket trajectories. Mom, look at this, Emma said, showing her a photograph of Katherine Johnson. She didn't let anyone tell her she couldn't do math because she was a girl. She just kept learning and got so good that NASA needed her to send people to space. Victoria smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. That's right. Sometimes we have to fight for our dreams. Did you have dreams like that when you were little? The innocent question hit Victoria harder than expected. I wanted to design beautiful buildings. Why don't you do that now? Because life got complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices. Emma looked thoughtful. But Katherine Johnson had complicated life too. She had a family, and people told her she couldn't do things. But she did them anyway. Out of the mouths of babes, Victoria pulled her daughter close, marveling at the wisdom hidden in 8-year-old observations. The next morning, Jonathan was waiting at the cafe again. This time, Victoria approached his table with more confidence. I've been thinking about what you said, she began, sitting down without being asked. And I want to meet your terms. If you're serious about helping, then I have conditions. Jonathan leaned forward. Name them. First, Emma meets you properly. As my friend from childhood, nothing more until we figure out what this is. Agreed. Second, any financial help you offer is a loan, not a gift. I'll pay you back every penny. Victoria, that's not necessary. It's necessary for me. I won't be your charity case. Jonathan nodded slowly. If that's what you need. Third, you don't make any major decisions about Emma's life without consulting me first. You don't get to swoop in and play father figure just because her real father is absent, I understand. Victoria took a deep breath. And finally, you need to understand that I'm not the same girl you knew in Millbrook. I'm a mother first, everything else second. If you can't handle that, then we should end this before it begins. Jonathan reached across the table and took her hand in both of his. Victoria, the fact that you're such an amazing mother only makes me love you more. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with years of separation and the weight of new possibilities. Victoria felt her walls crumbling, but she forced herself to stay strong. Don't say that word yet, she whispered. We barely know each other anymore. Then let's get to know each other again, Jonathan said. Slowly, carefully, the right way this time. Victoria looked into his eyes and saw the boy who had once promised to love her forever, grown into a man who seemed willing to prove it. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, some dreams were worth fighting for after all. Okay, she said quietly. Let's try. Jonathan's smile could have powered the entire city of Seattle. When can I meet Emma? Saturday. We usually go to the park near our apartment. You can join us, but Jonathan? Yes, don't break our hearts. We've been through enough, I promise, he said. And Victoria found herself believing that this time, he might actually keep that promise. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. One of those rare Seattle days when the sun actually made an appearance. Victoria had changed her outfit 3 times before settling on jeans and a soft green sweater that Emma had picked out because it made her eyes look pretty. She was more nervous than she wanted to admit. "Is your friend coming to play with us today?" Emma asked, swinging their joined hands as they walked toward Riverside Park. "Yes, sweetheart. His name is Jonathan, and we knew each other when we were teenagers, like Romeo and Juliet." Victoria nearly choked on her coffee. "Where did you learn about Romeo and Juliet?" "Madison's big sister told us about it. They were teenagers who loved each other, but their families didn't like it. So it was all dramatic and stuff. Well, Jonathan and I were friends. Not quite like Romeo and Juliet," Victoria said carefully. Emma considered this. "But you liked him, right? The way you get all smiley when you talk about the past?" Victoria marveled at her daughter's perceptiveness. "Yes, I liked him very much." They found Jonathan waiting by the duck pond, looking perfectly at ease on a park bench despite his expensive clothes. He had brought a bag of breadcrumbs and was already surrounded by hopeful waterfowl. When he saw them approaching, he stood with a smile that made Victoria's heart skip. "You must be Emma," he said, crouching down to her eye level. "I'm Jonathan. Your mom has told me wonderful things about you." Emma studied him with a serious expression she reserved for important evaluations. "She said you were friends when she was young. Did you know she wanted to build houses?" "I did know that," Jonathan replied solemnly. "She used to draw the most beautiful designs. Houses with secret reading nooks and gardens full of flowers." Emma's eyes widened. "She still draws sometimes, but she thinks I don't notice. She hides the papers under her mattress." Victoria felt her cheeks burn. "Emma, that's private. Sorry, Mom." Emma turned back to Jonathan. "Do you want to feed the ducks with us? Mom brought good bread, not the white kind, that's bad for them." "I would love that," Jonathan said, and Victoria could tell his enthusiasm was genuine. They spent the morning by the pond, Emma chattering about school, her friends, and her project on Katherine Johnson. Jonathan listened with the same focused attention he probably gave to million-dollar business deals, asking thoughtful questions that made Emma beam with pride. Katherine Johnson was so smart, Emma explained. Throwing bread to a particularly aggressive mallard, she could do math in her head that took other people calculators to figure out. And when the computers first came, the astronauts didn't trust them. They said, "Get Katherine to check the numbers. If she said they were right, then they would fly to space." "That's incredible," Jonathan said. "She sounds like someone who never gave up on her dreams." "That's what I told Mom," Emma said. "Sometimes you have to fight for what you want, even when it's hard." Victoria caught Jonathan's meaningful glance and looked away. Focusing on a family of geese gliding across the water, after the ducks were thoroughly fed, they walked to the playground. Emma ran ahead to the swings, leaving Victoria and Jonathan to follow at a slower pace. "She's amazing," Jonathan said quietly. "She's got your intelligence and your determination, but there's something else there too. A lightness, a joy that you had when we were young." "She's the best thing I've ever done," Victoria replied. "Everything else in my life might be a mess, but I got her right." "Your life isn't a mess, Victoria. You're raising an incredible daughter while working multiple jobs and keeping your family together. That's not mess, that's heroic." Before Victoria could respond, Emma called out from the swings, "Jonathan, can you push me? Mom never pushes hard enough." "I push just right. Thank you very much," Victoria called back. But she was smiling. Jonathan jogged over and began pushing Emma's swing, listening to her delighted squeals as she soared higher than Victoria usually allowed. Watching them together, Victoria felt something shift inside her chest. Emma was laughing freely, the way children should, and Jonathan's face held an expression of pure contentment. "Higher," Emma demanded. "I want to touch the clouds." "One cloud-touching push coming up," Jonathan replied, giving her swing a firm push that sent her soaring. They spent another hour at the playground before Emma announced she was hungry. Jonathan suggested lunch at a nearby family restaurant. And before Victoria could object about the expense, Emma had already grabbed his hand and started pulling him toward the exit. The restaurant was warm and welcoming. With checkered tablecloths and crayons for the kids, Emma immediately began drawing while they waited for their food, creating an elaborate picture of 3 stick figures by a pond surrounded by ducks. "That's us," she announced, holding up her artwork. "Mom, you, and me." Victoria's throat tightened. In Emma's innocent drawing, they looked like a family. "It's perfect," Jonathan said seriously. "May I keep it?" Emma beamed and signed her name in careful letters across the bottom. "You can put it on your refrigerator?" "I definitely will." "Over lunch?" Emma peppered Jonathan with questions about his work, his travels, and why he had moved back to Seattle. He answered each one honestly, but in terms an 8-year-old could understand, never talking down to her or dismissing her curiosity. "Do you have kids?" Emma asked, taking a bite of her grilled cheese. "No," Jonathan replied. "I don't. Do you want kids?" Victoria nearly choked on her soup. "Emma, that's a very personal question." "It's okay," Jonathan said gently. "Yes, Emma, I would love to have children someday. I think being a parent would be the most important job anyone could have." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Mom says being my mom is her favorite job. Even though it doesn't pay money, the best jobs usually don't pay money," Jonathan agreed. "They pay in hugs and drawings and getting to watch someone amazing grow up." After lunch, they walked slowly back toward Victoria's apartment building. Emma skipped ahead, chasing pigeons and collecting interesting leaves, giving the adults a chance to talk. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly. "For today, for being so wonderful with her, I should be thanking you. This has been the best day I've had in years. She likes you. I like her too. She's remarkable, Victoria. You should be so proud. I am." Victoria paused. "Jonathan, I need to tell you something." He stopped walking, his expression suddenly serious. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about what you said about school, about my dreams. I looked into some programs, just online research. There's a part-time architecture program at the community college. It would take longer than a traditional degree, but I could still work and take care of Emma." Jonathan's face lit up. "That's wonderful. When would you start?" "I haven't decided if I'm going to do it yet. It's a big step and expensive. And I'm not even sure I remember how to study. You're one of the smartest people I know. And as for expensive... ... He held up a hand when she started to object. "I know what you said about loans. We can work out terms that make you comfortable." They had reached Victoria's building, a modest 3-story structure with flower boxes in the windows and children's bikes chained to the front railing. Emma was already at the door, fishing in her backpack for keys. "This is us," Victoria said, suddenly embarrassed by the contrast between Jonathan's penthouse and their humble home. "It looks perfect," he said, and she could tell he meant it. Emma had gotten the door open and was holding it for them. "Do you want to see my room?" she asked Jonathan. "I have a fort made out of blankets." Victoria was about to make excuses, but Jonathan was already nodding enthusiastically. "I would love to see your fort." Their apartment was small, but cozy. Emma's artwork covering the refrigerator and Victoria's few treasured books lining makeshift shelves. Emma dragged Jonathan to her room, which she shared with Victoria, and proudly showed off her blanket fort constructed between the 2 beds. "This is my reading cave," she announced, crawling inside. "Mom reads to me here every night." Jonathan crouched down and peered into the fort. "This is the best reading cave I've ever seen. Very professionally constructed." Emma giggled from inside the blankets. "Do you want to hear me read?" "I'm really good now. I would love that." Victoria watched from the doorway as her daughter read from her favorite book about a brave little mouse, her voice clear and confident. Jonathan listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking questions or commenting on the pictures. When Emma finished the story, she crawled out of the fort and looked up at him seriously. "Jonathan, are you going to marry my mom?" Victoria's heart stopped. "Emma, you can't ask people things like that." "Why not?" "Madison's mom says that when a man likes a lady, and the lady likes him back, sometimes they get married and become a family." Jonathan looked at Victoria. his eyes soft and full of something that looked suspiciously like love. "Emma, your mom and I are still figuring out how to be friends again. Marriage is something that happens when two people love each other very much and want to take care of each other forever, like in the movies. Sometimes like in the movies, but real life is usually more complicated than movies." Emma considered this. "Do you love my mom?" "Emma Rose Hayes," Victoria said, her voice strangled. "That's enough questions for one day." But Jonathan crouched down, so he was eye level with Emma again. "Yes," he said simply. "I do love your mom. I have loved her for a very long time." Emma smiled triumphantly. "I knew it. You get the same look Mom gets when she thinks about you." Victoria felt tears threatening. "What look?" "Happy but sad at the same time. Like you want something, but you're scared to want it." The wisdom of children never ceased to amaze Victoria. From the mouths of babes indeed. Jonathan stood and moved closer to Victoria. "She's right, you know. I do love you. I never stopped loving you, Jonathan, ... I know it's complicated. I know we have a lot to figure out. But I also know that losing you once was the biggest mistake of my life. And I'm not going to make that mistake twice." Emma looked back and forth between them like she was watching a tennis match. "Are you going to kiss now?" "That's what happens in the movies." Victoria laughed despite herself, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "Real life isn't like the movies, baby." "Maybe it could be," Jonathan said softly, reaching up to wipe away her tears. "Maybe we could write our own story this time." Emma clapped her hands. "With a happy ending." "With whatever ending we choose," Victoria whispered, looking into Jonathan's eyes and seeing their entire future reflected there. For the first time in 12 years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, some fairy tales could come true. Outside, the Seattle sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Inside a small apartment in a modest building, 3 hearts that had been separate were learning how to beat as one. And in a little girl's blanket fort, surrounded by books and dreams and the promise of tomorrow, love was quietly building the foundation for the family they were all brave enough to choose. The next morning, Victoria woke to find a manila envelope slipped under her door. Inside were enrollment forms for the architecture program. It's already filled out in Jonathan's careful handwriting, with a note that simply said, "Every dream deserves a second chance. All my love, Jonathan." Emma found her crying happy tears over her coffee cup and patted her hand consolingly. "It's okay, Mom. Sometimes grown-ups cry when good things happen too." And for once, Victoria didn't try to hide her tears, because her daughter was right. Sometimes the best things in life were worth crying over.